January 2019. Across Canada, 76,000 people open an app they trusted with their savings and find the door won't open. The country's largest cryptocurrency exchange has frozen, and it owes them something like $215 million. The company's explanation is almost too neat. The only person who could reach the money, they say, is dead. Their founder, Gerald Cotton, 30 years old, died 5 weeks earlier on his honeymoon in a hospital in India, and the passwords, they insist, died with him. For years, that story kept attention on the wrong question. Not who died, but what was already gone. Because when investigators finally forced the vault open, they didn't find a fortune waiting behind one lost password. They found that most of the money had been traded away and spent long before India. And that only Gerald had the keys was never really a tragedy. It became the perfect cover story for a theft that was already complete. Welcome to Tycoons and Traitors, empires built on nerve and the greed that brought them down. The story begins in 2013, when Bitcoin was still a curiosity most banks refused to touch. Gerald Cotton was young, soft-spoken, almost boyish, the kind of founder people instinctively trusted. He launched QuadrigaCX's as a place where ordinary Canadians could finally buy and sell crypto without flying money offshore. And it worked. As Bitcoin's price exploded, Quadriga rode the wave to become the largest exchange in the country. Hundreds of millions of dollars in customer deposits flowing through it. But the company had a second founder most customers never heard about. An early partner, using the name Michael Patrin. Years later, journalists would identify him as Omar Dainani, a man with prior convictions for financial crimes in the United States. He left the company years before it collapsed, and that doesn't make him the architect of Cotton's later fraud, but it mattered less as a plot twist than as an early sign of how little scrutiny surrounded the company, and how much its customers were trusting on nothing but faith. Here is what the regulators would eventually prove. By the time investigators had reconstructed Quadriga's books, the picture was damning. It had been operating less like an exchange than a fraud. Cotton created a web of fake accounts under invented names, and credited them with money that didn't exist. Phantom balances, conjured out of nothing. Then he used those fake balances to trade against his own real customers. When you thought you were buying Bitcoin from another user, you were often buying it from Gerald Cotton's imaginary hoard and handing him real dollars in return. And when customers asked to withdraw, he simply paid them with money freshly deposited by the next wave of customers. That has a name. It's the oldest fraud in finance, a Ponzi scheme, dressed up in the language of the future. Where did the real money go? Into losses on reckless trades, and into a life, a yacht, a private plane, luxury cars and homes. The savings of tens of thousands of strangers, quietly converted into one man's lifestyle. If you want more reporting like this, a like genuinely helps it reach the people who'd want to see it. Now, any real bank has controls, audits, co-signers, someone watching the person in charge. Quadriga had none of that. It was never registered with regulators. There was no board holding Cotton to account, no independent audit of its vaults, no second set of eyes. In fact, a company holding nearly $200 million of other people's money was run, essentially, off Gerald Cotton's personal laptop. Every password, every wallet, every record funneled through one man, and only one man. After his death, the company's explanation leaned on that same design. Only Gerald could reach the wallets. But turn it around. If every door in a building has exactly one key, and one person holds it, then that person can quietly empty every room, and leave everyone else to reconstruct the damage after the fact. A legitimate financial company treats that kind of dependence as a risk to eliminate. For a fraud, it was an advantage. In the autumn of 2018, Gerald Cotton married his partner, Jennifer Robertson. 12 days before he died, he signed a will, leaving her his fortune, the yacht, the plane, the properties. Then the couple flew to India for their honeymoon. On December 9th, in the city of Jaipur, Gerald Cotton was admitted to hospital with complications from Crohn's disease. Within a day, the company would later say he was dead, 30 years old. Quadriga waited weeks to tell anyone. When it finally did, in January, the message was devastatingly simple. The founder is gone, and the money is locked in vaults only he could open. Public suspicion was immediate. The sudden death abroad. The will signed days earlier. The weeks-long silence before anyone was told. That suspicion is understandable, but it can quietly hijack the whole story. Because whether Gerald Cotton is alive or dead changes nothing about the crime. By the time he boarded that plane, the vaults he supposedly took to his grave had already been empty for months. When the court appointed the accounting firm Ernst & Young to find the money, they went looking for Quadriga's famous cold wallets, the offline vaults where the customer Bitcoin was supposedly sleeping, safe and untouchable. They were empty. They had been drained since around April of 2018. The funds moved out to other exchanges and bled away, months before anyone flew to India. In 2020, Ontario's securities regulator delivered its verdict. Quadriga's collapse, it ruled, was not a tech mystery. It was old-fashioned fraud, wrapped in modern technology. Roughly $115 million had vanished through Cotton's fake trading alone. 76,000 people were owed their money back. In the end, only a fraction, around 46 million, was ever recovered. So the mystery was always misdirection. However, Gerald Cotton died. The money was already gone. The cold wallets were already empty. The controls had never existed. The lost password story wasn't the cause of the collapse. It was the explanation that hid what had already happened. And the real scandal isn't that one young man told a lie. It's that a country's largest exchange could hold $200 million of its citizens' money, with no one, anywhere, ever checking whether the vault was real. The people who lost everything weren't undone by a dead man's secret. They were undone by trust, given freely, to a system that had quietly decided no one needed to look inside. For more stories about power, fraud, and the institutions that were supposed to stop it, and didn't, subscribe to Tycoons and Traitors.